for me, even though while he was still struggling at juvenile, I would say like I was putting him as a 10 out of 10 potential player. Even now, I would like to to have him as definitely on that list.
Welcome to episode 599 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and you have been patient long enough. So without further ado, it's the La Masia summer update. It is finally here, and I did have to wait a little while, too, to finally have ArsenKveFCB back from Barca Buzz, back onto the Barcelona podcast, because we did have to wait until after the Barca Athletic season had ended. But again, we also had to do this before too many other academy kids transferred out the way they have in the last week, including finally today, officially today, for Marc Gue. But let's start ArsenKveFCB with maybe the biggest news for the academy this summer, and that is that Rafa Marquez will be back for another year after failing to win promotion at the last hurdle. Is that a good move for all parties, or should Marquez maybe have moved on?
Well, from Barca's side, I would say it's a good move because, again, trying to replace him, find another suitable coach who will see, who will be able to perform like Rafa has, will be quite difficult. And in general, I'm happy that he's staying. Of course, there's some negatives about his like vision, especially last season with how he played some players. But in general, I see it as positively.
All right, let's dive right into the tier list. If you're watching, now is the time to watch because you have in front of you the criteria for this tier list that we just practiced with a few weeks ago with the transfer stuff is the best chance to make it into the first team and make at least 15 appearances within the next 2 to 3 seasons. So I know I said a lot there, so I'll repeat it again. We have 5 categories. It's definitely going to make 15 appearances within the next 2 to 3 seasons. It's likely, 50-50, unlikely, and never or not going to happen in the next 2 to 3 seasons unless they come back way down the road. And that 2 to 3 season, and you could even with the 15, 16-year-old, we have 1 or 2 of those, so you could even push that out, to 4 or 5 to say those players will someday be there, sure. But that 2 to 3 season threshold means that there is no Shane Kluivert, there is no Michael Zook, no Cadet A or U16 players, basically. Yes, they might be age-wise, but it's 15 or 16-year-olds playing with the U18s, U19s, and again, only 2 steps or so, or even Barca Athletic, and a step away from the first team. So I think on this list I have 25 names for everybody, and I think I got everybody I wanted to, but if I missed somebody, you can either put it in the comments or hit me up on social media if you're listening, and you can assume it's also because either you or I think that they're more than 2 seasons away from being first team ready. And then the other final criteria is it's 20 years of age or younger, so you'd assume it's only just the beginning. And also players that have already made 15 appearances, so Gabi, Balde, Lamine Yamal, Kubarsi, Fermin Lopez, they are not on this list. And then Hector Ford has already made 10 appearances, and I would assume that he will probably make 5 more. And because he's already in the first team dynamic, we didn't cover that because, again, that would be an easy definitely. Now, let's start here. People waited again long enough with our 1 of 25 on the list, and we begin with an absolute never because as of today, I guess officially, Marc Gue going to Chelsea for $6 million. He scored 2 goals to the first team this season in 2 appearances, also scored 6 times with Barca Athletic in 14 appearances, leaves at just 18 years of age, and with Vitor Roque, with Lewandowski, and with how difficult it is to make first team appearances for these huge, huge clubs as a striker, I totally get the move. But it's to Chelsea. That's what makes it so perplexing here, other than the fact that they offered him 3 times what Barcelona did. So it really does feel like it came down to the money here more than all that talk about, hey, I think I've got a future somewhere else.
Yeah, definitely. Like Mark's transfer became like a big shock for me as well because I didn't expect like he's a big Kule and a massive fan of Barcelona for a long, long time. He has been here since I think he was 7, so entire his footballing career. And I don't know what Chelsea has promised him or how they managed to. Was it like the agency that managed to convince him somehow or something, or what happened behind the scenes of his contract renewal? So it's a very interesting story.
Yeah, it was one that you weren't really expecting to leave, but as I said, with all the other competition and forwards and things like that, I mean, it's tough for him to potentially see a path forward. So maybe they've got a really good idea to send him on loan. But if that's the case, then why didn't you do it at Barcelona, get better, then come back? Because Lewandowski is 36 years old, going to be 37. So there, in theory, was going to be opportunities. But anyway, our other never here is went official a few days ago. Andre Natali, the 16-year-old Italian center back who just won the Euro U17 with Italy. Also played mainly with the U18s this season. A lot of other center backs in the academy, but it does feel like an opportunity thing too. Bayer Leverkusen has a lot of games to play. They've got a really good system, and they had a little bit more money to spend, and they seem to be investing in him more than Barcelona were going to be able to, especially with Kubarsi kind of blocking that spot than other center backs. So it's not the craziest move for the Italian center back, but still, he was considered a pretty big prospect, and whenever you have those other, we'll say, internationals, like from other countries, and then like him being Italian, I think it always gets a little bit more buzz.
Yeah, but for me personally, it's not like the biggest loss that we have this season, as we still have a lot of center backs coming through, either at younger ages or even now at Juvenile A or Juvenile B. It's a big talent. Andre is a big talent, but it's not like the most like saddest departure in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Again, it's also at the age at 16 as a center back. You have no idea where he's going to be in 4 years, even 5 years. He's 21 years old. So who knows? Now, a 19-year-old who is on the precipice of a first team somewhere, Mika Faye. Now, with Porto and Deco having discussions and different numbers have been thrown around, whether it's 5 million, whether it's 15 million, buyback options, no buyback options. So at the moment, we don't really know about Mika Faye, but I don't think there's another player that we're going to talk about today who different fans have differing opinions about. You see a lot of fans online say, hey, why is he not already in the first team as a left center back option, as a left back option? And then you have others who are saying, hey, I'm watching him with Barca Athletic, and I know that this is, you're part of that camp, and I've also seen the issues as well about who he is right now, which is different also than who he could be in the future, which I think makes his future so complicated in the next 2 to 3 seasons. And I don't even know where to put him because, I mean, yeah, today, where he's at and where the club, I think, might see him going and why they're going to have to ship him off, it gets really complicated very quickly.
Yeah, it's funny because the fans first like were questioning his signing because when the news were coming out, it was like we're spending almost like 4 million for him, with like 1.5 million fixed and other uh, money in variables. But when he started playing for Barca Athletic, he convinced quite a lot of saw him as a big talent. For me, he's quite raw, and maybe this move could be beneficial for him, especially in a Portuguese club as Porto, where they doing a great job developing youngsters as well. But the story with Mika is that there's a lot of different stories coming from Catalan media and from Portuguese media, because Catalan media is saying 15 million. That's the fee that we're gonna get, while Portuguese are not convinced that such money are involved, and saying about like around 5-8 million, and they don't want to include a buyback option. But as we hear from Spanish media, that's key for us. Well, it's difficult to see, but his transfer looks very likely, and maybe in the tier list, I'll put him in unlikely situation.
Yeah, just based on opportunity and Barcelona trying to potentially someday cash in on it. On the other side of things, now we're finally getting into the players. The other 21 players are all players that will likely be around FC Barcelona at the club, even potentially going on loan, but will likely be at the club next season. Starting with Marc Casado, who could be in the first team. 4 appearances with the first team last season, so he only needs 11 to hit this threshold. 31 appearances with Barca Athletic as their captain, and I had always been pretty skeptical on what his ceiling was going to be with the first team. I've said it many times, and I could very much be proven wrong here because, again, I thought this season he'd be leaving, but instead, he's still just 20 years old, and the 20-year-old does seem to be sticking around for a while, having renewed until 2028. And as I said, I've been skeptical about him as a first-team player, but he is still just 20. How likely do you think he succeeds with the first team? And also, what do you think success looks like for him this season and the next 2 to 3 seasons as we try to put him on this tier list as well?
Well, for now, it depends on who Barca will sign as their main defensive midfielder. But I don't see him that the starter, at least for now. But he could be a quite useful rotational player, especially for Heinz Flick, uh, who plays in a double pivot system. And I think Casado would suit perfectly in there. He can also play as a right back, sometimes center back as well, where he played some games in during his youth time. For me, I would say it's more like likely he would make like 15 appearances, but it all depends on his preseason. Does Hans Flick will find how he can use him? But he's definitely gonna be in the first team dynamics next season, as which contract renewal happened. So we'll see either he will go on loan or stay in the first team.
What gets complicated when you watch him with Barca Athletic too is I've kind of said that I feel like as a first team player, he does kind of fit more in. Now the double pivot changes things, but in the 4-3-3 that Rafa Marquez was playing last season, he was playing as a defensive midfielder, and it totally makes sense to me in the third division. But I feel like with his ball winning abilities, he makes me feel like he's more of a deep sitting interior than the defensive midfielder. But with the next guy here, Marc Bernal, who people have said, okay, maybe he's going to be the pivot of the future. Well, it's Bernal, the 17-year-old who played 16 years old for so much of the Barca Athletic season, just recently turning 17. He was the one playing as an interior and playing and pushing higher forward, while Casado was the defensive midfielder. So Bernal, 17 years old, played 5 UEFA Youth League games this season, but oh yeah, he also played 31 times for Barca Athletic, including starting all 4 promotion playoff games, playing 98% of all minutes in the playoffs, and picking up 2 assists. He also scored 2 goals and had 3 assists in the third division in the regular season. So being a 16-year-old for so much of the year, just a really, really fantastic opportunity, I think, for what was a 16-year-old and now a 17-year-old. And when we talk about the next 2 to 3 seasons, I feel like with everything the club is investing in him, this might feel like our first definitely, because even if he doesn't have the highest ceiling, I think he will get at least 15 opportunities with the first team over the next, again, 2 to 3 seasons to decide whether or not, he could be not the guy in a single pivot, but could be one of the guys in the midfield going forward.
Yeah, as you just mentioned, I don't see him as a single pivot because the thing with him is that he hasn't played in that role as a defensive midfielder during his youth, and he started playing there maybe like 2 years ago. So because he mostly played as an eight or even as a 10 sometimes during his cadet times, and but we don't see that often that a player jumps straight from cadet A, which is under 16 teams, straight to Barca Athletics. So it's a massive talent, showcases his capabilities. He has the physique to play in a pivot positions, and you never know, maybe if we will go back to single pivot position system, he could develop there as well.
Yeah, we'll have to see. The other side is Guille Fernandez. When I say other side, I mean maybe the other side of this definitely chart because he just turned 16 last week, so he was 15 all of last season. That's how young he is. He went from being an insanely young player in the UEFA Youth League, so Lamine Yamal, young records, and by the end of the season, he had made 7 appearances for Barca Athletic with an assist, plus 1 brief appearance in the promotion playoffs. You and I have both said separately, and you said it last time together last summer, that when you talk about can't miss prospects in the academy right now, and we're going to talk about a lot of attacking midfielders and interiors, or whatever you want to call it, especially if Hansi Flick's system, but even in Barca Athletics 4-3-3 with the 2 interiors, if that's what Rafa Marquez continues to do, if you're anybody else, even older than him, you're saying, I don't know how I'm going to beat this kid out for minutes because Guille Fernandez looks like the real deal. Physically, there were worries that he wasn't going to be able to transition to higher levels, but he's looked right at home, regardless of how big an adult everyone else looks. This kid, again, 16, looks like the next one in line, and that's why I'm going to, again, put him indefinitely because we have a lot of harder choices I'm going to make you make. But yeah, just a quick word on Guille Fernandez.
Yeah, Gile is definitely like the biggest midfield talent since Gavi, and even though Gavi only 18, it seems like he has been playing for Barca for a long time. With Gile, he has that physique that helped him a lot during his early stages, and that's why we have seen him being in juvenile B, He kind of struggled a bit in the first weeks of Juvenile A, so he went back to Juvenile B, performed there quite well, and Rafa Marquez called him up, so it's a good sign, and hopefully he will sign his renewal soon, as there are rumors that Jorge Mendes, which is his agent, will talk to the club and see what their plans are, and then he should be signing his renewal.
Yeah, between Ansu Fati and Balde and João Felix and Cancelo and Guille Fernandez and Lamine Mall, right? It seems like João Mendes should just, I don't know, just have an apartment in Barcelona and just stay there. Why ever leave with all the work he has to do? And you think everyone kind of negotiating at the same time. Angel Alarcon, next on our list, 20-year-old left winger, more injuries this season, which has been the story of his time in the academy. Held to just 3 total goals between the UEFA Youth League and Barca Athletic in 13 total appearances, just 527 total minutes this season. So not counting his U19 minutes, which were generally used to help with his fitness, but actual minutes that were kind of at his level, we'll say, because he's a bit higher than the U19 level at this point. It's really tough with Angel Alarcon, and this is kind of the first one that I don't know where we put him.
Hmm. Yeah, with Angel, I kind of feel sad because if we were talking like making this 2 or 3 years ago, he would definitely be there indefinitely. Remember that he suffered an injury like during the Copa Campeones for Juvenil A, and in that same season he was expected to do preseason with the first team, and a lot of those who followed La Masia then expected him to stay in the first team as well, especially when we needed a left winger. And Fati struggled a bit with injuries, so he could definitely be useful there. With Angel, he still like has that his ability, but his injuries can be problematic again as well. So for me, I would put him in 50-50. If he is injury free, he would definitely make those 15 appearances, maybe like 10 or 5 minutes each. But I would say it's 50-50 for me.
And the interesting thing about putting him in 50-50 is a reminder, while he did not make any first team appearances last season, he has already made 5. So in theory, he only needs to make 10 more to meet our criteria in next 2 to 3 seasons. But to your point, this is kind of that do or die moment now, I think, at this point. Unfortunately, what I will say is I'm almost pushing, while you're 50-50, I'm almost likely to 50-50 because the club seems to, every time he's healthy, you hear just great things. And whether it's Xavi and back to Koeman, I believe, when he was like 16, that they were just, they liked him. Every coach, everybody behind the scenes seemed to really like this kid. And I think they're really going to wait until that last moment until saying, all right, this kid is too far off his progressions and we're not going to be able to find a spot for him. So yeah, 50-50 on that one. That was a tough one. Pau Prim now, 18-year-old Pau Prim, interesting season for him as well. He was the captain for Spain at the U17 World Cup in the winter, so he did miss some club time. And he was basically one of the 2 backup defensive midfielders for Rafa Marquez with Barca Athletic, and at just 18 years old. So he's kind of the first example of a player who is, in theory, barely ahead of schedule, actually. Not barely, but barely has a negative connotation, but he is just still ahead of schedule at 18, playing with Barca Athletic, making 14 appearances. And he played more minutes with the UEFA Youth League in 6 matches than he did in the 14 Barca Athletic matches. But with all the other, we'll say, competition that I just keep mentioning around that same age, around that same position of defensive midfielder or, low interior, whatever it might be, or double pivot, again, he's a tough one as well because there's so much other competition, but yet he's still just 18 years old. And I know it feels like we've known about him for a while, but he's still so young.
Yeah, Pau Prim was definitely like a big talent since his early youth. And this season he kind of struggled for game time, I would say, and maybe his development slowed down quite a bit. But Rafa Marquez likes him as he was most of the season with Barca Athletic then in their dynamics. So it will be interesting to see what the club does. Will go back to Juvenil A or will he stay with Barca Athletic? But he's definitely like the technique is there. He can use both feet. Very great as a double pivot, especially for me at least. So for me, maybe it would be like in a 50-50 tier.
So Pau Prim going in 50-50. Now Unai Hernandez, 19 years old, 38 appearances with Barca Athletic, 10 goals, 7 assists, and a goal every 285 minutes. Almost 2,900 minutes with Barca Athletic. He was a regular starter on the left wing in front of Moja, Bernal, and Casado, and actually scored a hat trick against Ibiza in the second leg of the promotion playoffs. And for just 19 years old, that's pretty good. 10 goals and 7 assists at Barca Athletic. And it does make you wonder what his future is going to be or how useful he could be as well, because those are pretty good numbers for a 19-year-old. And yet you don't, even when I see him, you don't really see the high ceiling. But I mean, Fermin Lopez kind of already showed you that you don't really necessarily, as long as you can fit into the picture, then it could be your time. And I have a hard time with Unai Hernandez placing him as well.
Well, for me, I'm a big fan of Unai Hernandez, to be honest. Since he arrived from Girona, he was performing amazingly for Juvenil A, being like the top scorer, whilst having teammates like Lamine Yamal also were playing together. And it's not not usual to see a player jump from Juvenil A and Barca Athletic can be as important as he was for Rafa Marquez, being second top scorer, also most assists, I think, as well. So for me, he's a big talent, and maybe this season, which is 24-25 season, for him it would be make it or not. And I think he will make those 15 appearances even this season, so I will put it in likely.
So we're going likely for Unai Hernandez. Have to find him there. Next up, a German young player, potentially playing under a German coach, Noah Darvich, 17 years old as well. And I want to remind people, I kind of go on my little rant here, I want to remind people, 16, 17, 18. I mean, there were years ago, even Cosalagna and Ricky Puig and Alex Callado. I mean, for even younger fans who remember trying to have those guys push up, they were 20 and 21. And in the case of Callado, 22 when they were trying to push in the first team. So when we're saying 17 years old, when we say 2 to 3 seasons, we have no idea. And that's why the threshold is just 15 appearances, which is still really low. So I just want to remind everyone that when we're talking about Noah Darvish, who is in his first season with the club, who it seems like a lot of Kool-Aids have already heard and knew that he didn't do well in the first part of the season and have kind of written him off already, but he didn't feature in the promotion playoffs, so it kind of bookended the season. It wasn't great at the beginning, was kind of missing at the end, but he did feature for Germany at the U17 World Cup, where he scored in the final, where Germany beat France on penalties, has seemed to be a really big prospect there. That's why Barcelona got him, and he seemed to also come back much more prepared. Got a few more minutes in the second half of the season, even if the scoring and goal contributions weren't there. Just a goal and 2 assists, and those all came in the same game against Terrell, but not every club he's going to play against is Terrell. That said, Darvich still just 17 years old, and he'll be 18 soon, but still, it seems like it's a really good sign for a player that you heard that the language and the getting used to Barcelona and the change was difficult for him. It seems like a good thing that the first team manager now isn't great at speaking Spanish either and is a German speaker. That seems to be good for Darvich in his future.
Yeah, no, Darvich arrived as a big talent after before winning the World Cup under 17. He struggled a bit adapting to Barcelona way, as we say it here, and because the way they play football in Germany or for the German national team at the youth level is very different compared to our way of football, because we like to have the possession, play with the ball, and that's not what they did in Germany. So I think he struggled a bit for game time, but it was still kind of weird for me because when he played in those games where he did well, the next few games he completely disappeared from not receiving any game time. But having Hansi Flick as a first team might help him better to understand the coach or help the way Hansi Flick wants to play. Difficult word to put him, but maybe in like likely or 50-50 because he's still like 16 or 17. So still a lot of time to adapt to Barca Athletic or to the first team.
Yeah, let's do 50-50 because we really don't know where his future is going to lie beyond the season. Or again, he also might get, not say unsettled, but if things aren't working, it might be in a week. I mean, that's happened to the youth kids. You don't really hear too much about it for good reasons, and then all of a sudden they're transferred out or they want to go someplace or whatever it is. So we're gonna go 50-50 on him. Oscar Gistau, U18 center forward, 16-year-old who ended the season unfortunately with an injury, but before that, he couldn't stop scoring for both the U18s and the U19s. He got called up to Xavi's training sessions a few times. He's a big, lanky boy who had just, again, turned 16 recently, and he is very much a traditional number 9 that even Mark Yu isn't. So I think you had a lot of players a lot of people, I should say, who watched the academy who said, all right, Mark Yu's gone. That's really frustrating because Barcelona does not really create too many center forwards. So losing a center forward like that, the same way that Iker Bravo left a few seasons ago, here's all I'll say. It's really hard to know what's going to happen with center forwards at youth level. More than any other position, that is the hardest position to predict. So I have a hard time kind of fitting where we're going to put him. But if I'm going to put my eggs in a basket of a center forward moving forward, I think it should be Oscar Gistau in this circumstance. So again, a center forward, you should always put him almost in unlikely or never. But as I said, in case of for this exercise, I feel like likely is the right spot for him.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. For me, Oscar Gistau is an even more talented striker compared to Marguerite, because Oscar has that ability to play with the ball, which Marguerite struggled a bit. But with Oscar and Marguerite, there's quite a few similarities because they both played for Juvenil B and Juvenil A at the same time. But with Oscar, he has been doing this season at the age of 15, while Mark was doing that at 16 or 17. So Oscar was doing the same thing as Mark, but just 1 year, while being 1 year younger. And for me, I definitely agree that he is likely to appear in the first team in 2 or 3 seasons, maybe even earlier. You never know.
Now it gets actually really challenging. And we'll try to pick up the pace a little bit because a lot of these players, with how young some of the ones we're going to talk about are, unlikely is probably a good spot for most of them, but yet again, we'll have to head somewhere bets to make this tier list not look completely insane. So picking up the pace a little bit with Quim Junyent, a 17-year-old center midfielder with the U19s, really did well at the U17 World Cup. He reads the game really, really well. There are definitely comparisons I could find to Gabi, certainly, while watching him at youth level. My worry for him really is just that there might not be enough room. But if some of these other names that we just talked about didn't exist, I'd be really, really, really high on Quim Junyent as a 17-year-old. But really, again, a good attacking midfielder. And what I like about his game, the word is pausa. That's what we use. And he just seems to have it in spades.
Yeah, Kim is definitely a big talent, and it will be interesting to see what happens with him this season. Because the interesting thing with him that I was told, someone close to the club, let's say, that Javi and his coaching department or the assistants were very impressed by Kim, and I think he would have been making his debut next season if Javi have stayed. And it will be interesting to see what Hansa Flick will think about him. Can he be useful for him or not? So, but he still needs to develop a bit, especially adapting to that physical level of. Maybe he might have some minutes in Barca Athletic next season or uh, first team. You never know.
So I think maybe we go 50-50 on him. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Yeah. So I
yeah,
think we're going to go
definitely.
50-50 on Quim Junyent. And pretty much the same conversation now, just a year younger. Juan Hernandez, speaking of doing well at the U17 World Cup, another center midfielder, but more of an attacking midfielder even than Junyent. 16 years old, I said, and how well he did at the U17 World Cup at that age. He also plays for the U19s at a younger age. Did shine with 2 goals in UEFA Youth League. Also made the Barca Athletic bench once, which is something that Junyent did not do. So Juan Hernandez seems like a really big talent, and of the names I think we're recently getting through and going to get through, he has been linked out of the club which would be the only reason I would probably put him in unlikely more than 50-50, because it seems like, as I've said, there's a logjam at the attacking midfielder spot, and not all of these players can make it. And even Juan Hernandez, while he might have the talent, he might just not have the time and the space and the timing based on his age.
Yeah, with Juan Hernandez is also an interesting situation because in his positions, Unai Hernandez also kind of playing, so it'd be between both of them because both can play a left winger or as a eight or as a 10 in that midfield. But as far as I know, that Juan was close to leaving PSG. At least that was, at least I was told during his contract renewal as a cadet. But another situation that another part of his representatives told me that he will be staying, and it was never close. So you always get those double-sided stories, and I haven't heard anything about him leaving, or at least thinking about leaving now. And you never know what's gonna happen. Was maybe some club will manage to attract him. Uh, but it's a different, like, interesting situation with him. For me, it's either on 50-50 or unlikely.
Well, let's put him at 50-50 because I'm looking up and down. I think we have a few more unlikelies to go. Pedro Rodriguez, another one, another six. I feel like I clumped these together in this way. Another 16-year-old center midfielder for the Barca U16s. So he is the level down or 2 levels down. I'm not really sure what his best position is yet. He does remind me a bit. I know I said his name already, but he does remind me a bit of Gabi in the few times that I've seen him in the way that he reads the game. And he seems to be everywhere all at once. It seems like he doesn't have any weaknesses in his game, but he does need to improve upon kind of everything. He has a little less bite than Gabi, and again, everything happening a little bit slower as well than even when we saw Gabi at 16 with the first team. An unfair comparison, but you get the point. Obviously, again, we did not see Gabi. I actually say I didn't see him with that same bite that he had at youth level that he does with the first team. Seems like Gabi wants to beat up adults more than he wanted to beat up other kids. But Pedro Rodriguez, again, another center midfield prospect and another high ceiling center midfielder prospect, almost to the point where Barcelona, we know they make a lot of midfielders, but again, how are they going to fit all these kids in?
Yeah, that's La Masia's number one problem. Always developing world class level midfielders. With Pedro, like you said, similar to Gavi, but like you can say that about Fermin Lopez as well. And with Pedro, well, that's the Andalusian blood
Mm-hmm.
going through them, as all of them are from the same region, and the qualities can be quite similar. With Pedro, I would say he's definitely another big talent. I would say even bigger than Quim Junyent. And for me, he has those qualities to play as an interior or even as a pivot defensive midfielder because he has played there while another player like Pedro Villar has been injured a lot this season, and Pedro was jumping between Cadet A and Juvenil B. Was very important for Juvenil B, scoring quite a few important goals, equalizers, or even winners, while being still like 15, 16. So yeah, for me, he's in that likely region to make it. Maybe not in 1 or 2 seasons, but maybe definitely like in 3 seasons.
So that's our first example of a 3 to 4 seasons. Again, so you see the other faces, and we put him in the farther future than the other ones in that likely category. Diego Kochen, 18-year-old American goalkeeper who, despite starting the season with an injury that kept him out, he was officially promoted to Barca Athletic in January. Here's the bad news. In his one Barca Athletic appearance, they did ship 4 goals to the Unionistas, but he did make his first team debut in that friendly in December against Club America. He also started in the UEFA Youth League in the game against Mainz that knocked him out, but the club does seem to value him quite a bit. And I always have a hard time because the next guy is a goalkeeper too in Aron Yaakobishvili. So let's actually kind of put these two together, and then we can put them where we need to together. Because Yaakobishvili is almost the opposite. He's also an 18-year-old. He's a Hungarian goalkeeper. He was the regular starter for the U19s and the UEFA Youth League. And as is the case with the goalkeeper situation in the academy, sometimes sitting on the bench of the higher level means that the club believes in you more than being the starter at the level where you belong, if that makes any sense. So it's really hard to tell with these two who not only the club would have a higher ceiling for because they're both 18 years old, and when we talk about is there enough space or room, obviously there's almost never any room for anybody but the first team goalkeeper. So unfortunately, I think we have to put both of these in unlikely, but I also don't want to put them in the same category. I kind of feel like it's our job to pick between which one might be 50-50 and which one might be unlikely because, at least one of them might be a backup in the future and the other one there might not be space for. So I don't know. Let's do one of them in 50-50, one of them in unlikely, or if you want to do one of them in unlikely and unfortunately one of them in never because it's not going to happen. And also I also want to throw out the 2 to 3 year rule because with young goalkeepers at 18, let's just say forever. At FC Barcelona, will either of these two ever make 15 appearances for the first team?
So with the goalkeepers, especially coming from Masia, it's quite difficult because you still have Ter Stegen in this situation, who still clubs appreciates and loves quite a bit, even though the fans do not. Let's say that, and he still has like 2, 3, 4, maybe in 5 years to play at Barcelona, especially if he's a long-term contract. And knowing with how everything involves depends if Inaki leaves, then maybe they have a chance to make those 15 appearances. Even then it's very very unlikely. But if looking at like both, if to pick one at 50-50 tier and one unlikely, I would say would be Diego Kochen at 50-50, as you mentioned. But I even put him more unlikely and then one at never, to be honest. So it's very difficult to pick in which tier because with goalkeepers it's very difficult because you almost never get a chance. Even Arnold Tennis was very close to leaving the club during his cadet age or even juvenile A. But I think Bartomeu managed to convince him to stay, even though it was more financial offer than sporting. And even another La Masia former goalkeeper, Joseph Martinez, who is very close to going to Inter Milan now, also left at juvenile A as he didn't see any opportunity to reach that first team or even Barca Athletic. So yeah, I prefer Diego as I prefer him a bit more than Aaron, but both are very talented goalkeepers, and it will be interesting to see who and how they develop.
Right. Again, being on this list at all in this top 25 means you're one of the best prospects in the academy. That's how you and I came to this list. So having Yaakobishvili in unlikely, again, says very little about him, other than the fact that there's so few opportunities for goalkeepers. And there's another one, the very same age, who's already debuted in a friendly for the first team. We haven't talked any left backs, I believe. So I think it's time to talk about a left back. 17-year-old Albert Navarro for the U19s. He did get called up to the Barca Athletic bench on 6 occasions this season, but did not see the field. But I was really impressed with him from what I saw from him in the UEFA Youth League this season. I think he was kind of went from, for me, a average prospect to a higher end prospect. And because there are not many left back prospects in the academy, it kind of, makes him a part of this conversation here.
Yeah, Albert Navarro, I would say even underrated talent because he always like plays with older guys than him, but no one mentions him ever because at 15 he was playing already with Juvenile B, and when he was promoted, when he signed his first contract renewal at 16, he was already playing with Juvenile A at under 19 team. And also, I think he was even called up to Barca Athletic a few times, if I'm not wrong, if I
Yeah, six
remember that
times. Yep.
correctly. Yeah, so yeah, he's quite underrated talent, as I said, and his profile is a bit different than we're used to. Maybe he's like that mix of Juan Miranda, which we're used to, and Marcos Alonso. I would say he can play as a left back, also can play as a left center back. So yeah, he's but his situation is very interesting because he needs, I would say, still need to develop. Because he's very tall and very like slim as well. He has the slim body. But if he builds that muscle mass, which he definitely would need at the professional level, he could make even a debut at the first team level. But so it all depends what's gonna happen because Balde there. Also, we'll need to see if Alex Weiler will stay or not. Will he stay for 2 or 3 seasons? But for now, I would say in 2 3 seasons, yeah, for me, it's either unlikely or 50-50 because it all depends if the club will go sign more experienced player as a backup to Balde, or they will trust Alex Valle, who is also like very young, I think 19 or 20. So yeah,
But there's also Hector Fort as well as the other
yeah,
option.
who can
So
play there?
right. So again, for 2 to 3 seasons, maybe he might be an example of 4 to 5 seasons if he goes on loan in 3 seasons now. But I'd expect him to continue to be in academy now for a few more seasons. Maybe some Barca Athletic, go out on loan, that kind of thing. So we're putting on likely for next 2 to 3 seasons. Toni Fernandez, cousin of Guillermo, as we see him on the Barca Athletic roster. So Guillermo or Guille Fernandez. So cousin of Guille Fernandez, Toni Fernandez, a 15-year-old who played mainly with the U18s before getting jumped up to the U19s, so way underage for that, in the second half of the season. Has this season, because our question at the start of the year is kind of the same one at the end of it, has this season given us any better idea with what his position would be with a first team? Because it seems like he is playing as a kind of false nine situation, attacking midfielder, forward thing. And the problem is, if you don't have an actual position, it's really hard to figure out where you're going to be in the first team. So I don't know where to put him, but he is just 15. All we know is at 15, he's uber talented and uber talented enough to play against U19s at the Juvenile A level. That is what we do know.
Yeah, Tony is definitely a big talent with his cousin Gile. And his position it's weird because for Barcelona he played as a false nine, as a striker, or even as a right winger. And most of his games for Spain youth has been as a that number 10 in that midfield. But he's also played during his like earlier stages in cadet. More as a 10 or midfielder, and then only then started playing as a false nine after scoring quite a few goals. Uh, for him, I don't know, to be honest, because first we need to see how his renewal goes. Because even though Tony said during like Instagram Live, I think saw some rumors that he's staying. But as far as I know, at least at the beginning of this week, there is still no agreement with the club that he will be staying and be promoted to Juvenil A or Juvenil B or whatever is the project is, because his environment are still waiting to see what the club expects, where he will play, or what's their sporting project for him. So if he is renewed eventually, I would say he another like story which is like 3 to 4, maybe even 5 seasons.
Exactly, yeah.
Uh, yeah, so it's difficult for me to put him like in those 50-50, maybe likely, because he's still like very short and doesn't have that physique to be able maybe to compete as a striker, I would say, compared to Oscar or other strikers. Or yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think 50-50. Because you see his natural raw talent, and you really don't know. It is 50-50 on whether or not that raw talent is going to go in the positive directions or, something will come in the way. But yeah, from 4 to 5 seasons, we're putting him at 50-50. Home stretch here, I think you see the names are getting smaller. Andres Cuenca, 17-year-old center back with the U19s, left-footed center back, regular starter in the UEFA Youth League. He got Barca Athletic bench appearances twice, but an injury kept him out from midway through December until the middle of March, so that was a big bummer for him. But still, as a left-footed center back, it always feels like if you're a left-footed center back who are playing up levels, there always is this, this sniff of 50-50. So I'm kind of on him. I think I'm somewhere between 50-50 unlikely, just because center back is really hard. I mean, you can't expect teenagers to make too many debuts. So even in the next 3 to 4 seasons, even Chadi Riyad was a pretty big prospect, and you'd think that he would have made appearances. So to make 15 appearances, is it fair to put Cuenca into unlikely here?
I would say yes, because even though he's interesting talent, especially as left-footed, which we don't have here on this list, but the thing which I kind of are like worried about him is his defensive capabilities, because with the ball he's probably one of the best, if not the best center back playing with the ball. That vision, passing ability is to be honest, amazing to be honest. So yeah, but defensively he has a lot of work to do. So maybe, yeah, unlikely is definitely where I will put him, at least for now.
All right, I feel like we've got two more just looking at the list ahead. We have two more really difficult ones, so let's knock those out now. Landry Farre, 17-year-old right back playing for the U18s. He was born in Cote d'Ivoire, though he was adopted in Spain and has lived the majority of his life there, hence why he's playing for the Spain youth national teams. He did join the Masia in 2015, but due to the FIFA ban, because he was born in Cote d'Ivoire, he was ineligible to play until January of 2016. And since he was still at the 7-a-side, though, at the time, I think this is just the backstory on him, this didn't really affect his development that much. He was also a highly rated as a center back in the same teams as Lamine Yamal. A lot of pictures of their youth, of those two together. And he has played step-ups a number of times as well. But unfortunately, since then, Farre has dealt with a number of injuries and things that have kept him off the field for a number of reasons. However, he is still 17, playing with the U18s, and he still has great two-footedness, and he still has sky-high potential, and it continues to keep him as one to watch. Now, I think there was a time when he was 14 or 15 that I would have put him automatically and likely, and we could have talked about him as definitely, but now I'm not sure exactly where to put him, because I don't know if he's a top shelf talent. Like we obviously with Bernal and Guille Fernandez, I don't think he's a definitely anymore, but I don't even know if he's a likely anymore. And yeah, that's why I said I think he's one of our last real tough ones here.
Yeah, Landry was a massive talent, to be honest, during his early stages, but his development kind of stopped at Cadet A, mostly because of his injuries, hamstring injuries, knee injuries. Because at the time he was still playing like 1 year above his category, while he was supposed to be with Cadet B, he was already with Cadet A. But then he struggled with injuries, like almost missed the entire season due to that. And he was told by the club, okay, do another season at the club at cadet A level, and we will see how it goes. Again, he struggled a bit with the injuries that next season, but despite that, the club decided to trust him and renewed his contract, uh, which shows that the club trusts him and sees massive talent in him still, even to this point. This season, I would say he had definitely a very strong and good season. Did very well for Juvenil B or Juvenil A to the point which he earned himself a call up to Spanish youth team. But if talking about how it's in which tier to put, uh, a very difficult situation because he also can play as a left back, center back, right back, anywhere in the defense. So if you're looking to that versatility at any point during the season, in those 2 3 seasons, I think he might make those 15 appearances. So I would put him maybe in likely. But again, it depends on his injury history if he's gonna stay fit or not.
Yeah, I'm going to have to overrule you here and put him in 50-50 just because of all the negativity and everything we talked about. I can't go on that whole list of all the time he's missed and injuries and all that stuff and then wind up putting him higher than 50-50. But because of just a massive talent he was, I'm uncomfortable to put him in unlikely as well. So I think 50-50 is kind of where I'm going to settle on him there. Next one, Dani Rodriguez, 18-year-old winger as of January in Barca Athletic, where he was, and he will officially, he's renewing this week, when we went to make this list, by the way, too, he was, I think, the name above all the rest, other than, of course, Mark Yu, which is kind of a surprise, that I didn't think would be around next season, and yet he's going to renew. So Barca Athletic, he played 13 times as Rafa Marquez already this season, 2 assists, including 3 appearances in the promotion playoffs and an assist there, so already integrated. And he was also good in the UEFA Youth League, arguably the best player for Barca this season, and usually the best player on the field in all those matches. 4 goals, 3 assists in 7 matches, and again, often looking just a class above the other kids on the field. He will be taking part in the U19 Euros in a few weeks. He is one of the 2 Barcelona players called up to the Spanish national team. And yet it's funny because he's another quite polarizing player to people who have not seen him or have just seen a little bit of him, because you see the highlights and you're like, why is that kid already not getting first team call-ups? And then you watch him for a full game and you're like, okay, that makes sense. But again, we're now projecting 2 to 3 seasons out, and I don't want to lead you a little bit here, but because the club renewed him, are we looking at a likely here? a little bit more likely than Angel Alarcon as well, even though he might not be the same talent?
Um, well, with Danny, I would say, while the public didn't know that he would be staying, and it came a big surprise for most of the public. Let's say that I know already for like quite a few months, even to be honest, but I promised not to speak about it to my source. So at first he was very close to leaving, like in January or February period, but a lot of things have changed in the few months, especially because of Danny's wanting to stay at Barcelona, him being very happy, but his environment was not very happy with Spanish media, and telling that how like the media can speak so much that are not true, or even about the we say the 2 years clause, which technically is not legal by UEFA, even though if Barcelona has triggered it, if it's let's say if it was true or not, cannot confirm or
Hmm.
say no to that, that Barcelona would have been in trouble because of that, because as per regulations, under 18 players cannot have any like those specific clauses that could renew him. But for me, even though while he was still struggling at juvenile, I would say like I was putting him as a 10 out of 10 potential player. Even though even now I would like to to have him as definitely on that list, because he always contributes somehow on the pitch, be it providing great passes, creating chances, or even recently we saw him providing an equalizing assist to Lucas Roman Pocho in that game against Cordoba in the first leg. But I would say I would meet with you on that likely tier list, and we can have him there, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, he reminds me of coming up through Ilash Akomash with more finishing product, because that was Ilash's problem, was that he didn't finish as much. But just to your point, having an impact, putting his fingerprint on games. So I'm going to go with likely here on the next 2 to 3 seasons as well, because that is going to be his window as well to either break into the first team a little bit and again expect to be a main figure for Barca Athletic next season. We'll see how he does there. Eman Kospo, another one for the future. So now it's another 4 to 5 year example here. 16-year-old center back for the U19s, the Swiss Youth International. Recent addition to La Masia last summer, joining from Grasshopper Club Zurich last July. That's the other big club in Zurich, by the way, not founded by Juan Gamper. So that is the other Zurich. So Kospo has been a really good signing for the U19s, where he is playing levels up, and he was also in UEFA Youth League, putting up clean sheets in the matches he played, and then the only one clean sheet in the one that they didn't get. There was only one clean sheet in the match that he didn't play in. Anyway, so at his age, I think he's again, just a big body, commanding presence against his age group and beyond, dictates play well, smart defender, but is his ceiling high enough? When we talked about Cuenca and some of the other ones, is his ceiling high enough to, in 4 to 5 years, be breaking into the first team?
Yeah, for me, I would say even Eman Kospo even a bigger talent than Andrea, for me at least, because he definitely came in from a Swiss club, never played like very possession football, despite being a Swiss youth national, even a captain for their under 16 and under 17 team. But he has adapted very well to Juvenile A, and I'm not gonna be surprised that he could be in Barca Athletic Dynamics in the summer. But again, it depends on Ruben Cantero or Alexis Olmedo, where he will play as a center back or more as a right back. And depends on departures and who will arrive in that center back positions. But for me, Eman Kospa, I would put maybe even in like likely or high 50-50 tier, to be honest.
Well, we are hedging our bets here. So we're going to do 50-50, but the idea is that it is a high 50-50. I know you're supposed to move it along, but yeah, okay. I don't have very good experience with these tier lists anyway. Let's talk about a name that you just said. Alexis Olmedo, 18-year-old right-footed center back playing for the U19s and Barca Athletic. He was a regular for the U19s, played at right back in the 2 games in the UEFA Youth League, so a bit of versatility for him as well. Unfortunately, missed the middle 4 months of the season with a pelvic injury, but Then the month that he came back with the U19s, Rafa Marquez gave him a call to Barça Athletic, highlighted by a header goal against Aaron in his third appearance. So he was kind of one that I wouldn't even have had on this list of 25 in January, and yet because he came back from the injury and seemed to immediately jump into the Barça Athletic dynamics at 18, now he's on this list. But the question is, where does he go on this list?
Yeah, with Olmedo, a funny story is that both Hector Fort and Alexis were playing at center back and right back for Cadet A at the same time. They were interchanging positions, both of them during the game. So even in other games, Alexis was playing center back, Hector was playing right back. The next game, you see Hector playing right back and Alexis at center back, and so it's a funny thing to see with them. Alexis was also a big talent, also playing for Spain national team, and he has done very well during Barça Athletic when Rafa Marquez lost Paco Barci, Faye, and Mbake also got injured. So, but if you're looking to put him in the list, and very difficult to pick, to be honest. For me, maybe 50-50 or unlikely in that area, to be honest.
Yeah, as much as he jumps up as a talent, I could see him very much being a Barça Athletic contributor and being a regular for Barça Athletic, and then never really making that push up to the first team. Because I think if this was the era of Koeman and the era of Oscar Mingueza, let's put it that way, then there might have been opportunities. But I think the academy, we just talked about Kubarsi and Fort, and I mean, who knows, Araujo, Koundé, and if Cancelo resigns, and Balde, and there are just so many other options, and even that we just named on this list as well above him in those categories. So we're going to go with unlikely on that one. Two left. Goalkeeper. Under Astralaga, 20-year-old, 16 appearances, 15 goals conceded, 6 clean sheets for Barça Athletic. Is he the main goalkeeper for Barça Athletic next season, or is he the backup with the first team? And could he ever be the main man for the first team? Because he was not one that you and I talked about with as having a high potential, but the club does like what he brings to training, and that can be helpful to keep you around as the second or third goalkeeper. But again, like goalkeepers, 15 appearances is really hard, so I might even have to change our criteria on him the way we do with the other two goalkeepers and say, is he going to make 5 appearances, in the next year or two?
Yeah, as I said, again, goalkeeper is difficult to say and predict even. Well, with Under, I would say he would be the first choice for Barça Athletic. But if Inaki leaves, then he will be the backup options most likely, because the club would like to save extra money and not get maybe an more experienced goalkeeper. So if Inaki leaves, I would definitely see Under being promoted and being the backup. But if looking at Barca Athletic, I would definitely see him as the main guy, the number one goalkeeper for it. But again, it depends if he will be traveling, or will it be Diego or Aron traveling with the first team as the third choices, even though not playing even a single minute or at all. So even though in one season it's difficult to say, to be honest, even those 5 appearances, because I think Inaki didn't even make 5 appearances for the first team until the second got injured.
Mm-hmm.
If talking about criteria, I would say unlikely to make those 5 appearances unless there's an injury to Inaki or even Ter Stegen. So
Yeah, I mean, Ter Stegen, though, is 32, did have the back stuff, so who knows about that, but yeah, we're going to put him in unlikely. I think that's a fair place. Last one. We've gotten to the end of the road here. Aleix Garrido, and I think we end with a pretty difficult one. 20-year-old center midfielder with Barça Athletic. Injury luck was a real bummer last season. After making his first team debut the season prior, he didn't feature at all this season, playing just 1,500 minutes or so. So remember, he only needs 14 appearances now to hit our criteria. It was a bone bruise in the fall, and then in March he broke his foot. just coming to play in the promotion playoffs before a foot bruise kept him out against Cordoba. So he played against Ibiza and then not against Cordoba. So injury troubles, which weren't really present throughout so much of his time in the academy. But now, again, 20 years old and all those foot injuries, really frustrating for him. And I'll leave it to you with one of the hardest ones we've had here, in whether or not this is kind of the moment for him, the make it or break it moment for him, on whether or not he's going to break into the first team or be on the board of the first team, or he'll be for Barça Athletic and then be heading out next summer.
Yeah, as you said, it's very tough on Alex because he definitely got very unlucky with the injuries. And I think his train, already passed, even though as much as I like him as a midfielder or as a player, because he's definitely like one to great, provide so many assists during his youth, even for Barca Athletic. He picks up occasional assists that he creates himself. But I think that train is not there anymore. So I would say even unlikely or even never, to be honest, at this point. But I would say, again, it depends on Hansi Flick, to be honest. Like, if he performs, maybe for Barca Athletic, he could get a few call-ups and get a few minutes as well.
Yeah, and we made this list where there's definitely, again, likely 50-50, so most of those even 50-50s will never hit 15. I mean, unfortunately, there might only be one player on this whole list that makes 15 total appearances for the first team, or you could get 10 of them that make 15 appearances, because this, as we keep saying, the reason I waited so long to make this list is that because this group from 15 to 20 years old right now is the most talented group that I've seen in 15 years, while, looking at the academy and trying to keep up with it the best I could. Now, we also have the most video and footage that we've ever had before of the academy, so it can inflate some of the profiles and inflate. But I think what I see from these kids, there are those things I'm looking for: the pausa, the timing, the decision-making. Again, this group is really, really talented. There just isn't enough time and isn't enough minutes in the first team for all of them, and they might have just missed their window with the amount of talent that's coming to the first team, especially if FC Barcelona also financially recovers to a 1-to-1 and can start to bring in additional first-team midfielders or forwards or defenders from outside of the club. That said, again, I really like this group. I wish they could all succeed, but that's not how it works. But you are going to continue to cover these ArsenKveFCB. So where can people not only find you, all the stuff you're working on, and I feel like I kind of want to get like a little bit of a tease of something. Just anything. Is it some kind of name or a country that a player might be linked to that may be coming over the summer, or just a little taste of anything that'll get people to follow you or something? I'm giving you some time to even make it up. I mean, you could even make it up. We won't know if the rumor doesn't come true. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I was told recently, or at least what actually happened. Well, I kind of talked about like there was an interest in juvenile, like a player that will come in juvenile or Barca Athletic, and without revealing the names, it was Jorge Bocchio. I knew about it even during February month, and it was very close. But again, well, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. But looking at now situation, there's a few very interesting players that will come to La Masia at the younger age. But looking at juvenile A. As far as I know, Barcelona is looking to sign a midfielder who is also playing for a youth national team of where he is from, but he's playing in Spain. Let's say that. But it's not closed as far as I know, but they're working on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be Paulo Iago, the Real Madrid. Speculating, you don't have to say anything. That's on me. That's on me if I'm wrong. All right. So again, follow him, ArsenKveFCB. He is all everywhere. He's on X or Twitter. He is on Instagram. He is on YouTube. You can find him on Barca Buzz. So everywhere you can find him covering the academy, doing maybe the best job out there in all the different iterations of people covering the academy. So well done by you. Thank you for going through this very tedious, but I think really fun, really enjoyable. And, it's the one clip more than any other that people ask for throughout the season. So I appreciate you joining me with for this update. I knew it was going to be a big one throughout this year because of, again, the number of talents and the fact that there's a 16-year-old Lamine Yamal in the first team, and there's a 17-year-old Pau Prim in the first team, and Hector Fort, and the academy seemingly has never been stronger. And I know we say that a lot, but it really has. It really is a great generation that I'm excited about. Patreons, thank you for continuing to help me make these shows now that I'm down seemingly to once a week. But we do have show 600 coming up next week, so strap in for that one. It'll be a good time. Closed Facebook group and Discord. That's the way to get involved in the community. And then, of course, a good rating on the podcast apps. Subscribing to the YouTube channel. That is the freest and easiest way to help me out. Also leaving comments, getting more engagement for the channel. That's also helpful. But most importantly, thanks so much for listening to this huge extended La Masia show for the summertime. Thanks so much for listening to the Barcelona podcast. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. And Forza Barca.